I still remember the day I got that letter. It wasn't just any letter. It was from the Homeowners Association. My heart sank as I read the words over and over. You are not allowed to host any gatherings or BBQs on your property. Violation will result in fines and legal action. I stared at the paper, confused and angry. How could a simple backyard BBQ become such a big deal? I'd been planning this for weeks. It wasn't just about grilling burgers or flipping hot dogs. It was supposed to be a small gathering, a way to bring some neighbors together, share stories, and maybe make some new friends. I've always respected the rules here. I keep my yard clean. I've never caused any trouble. So why now? Why me? I sat down, trying to calm the knot in my chest. The letter was cold, formal, and strict. No explanation beyond some vague mention of community standards and noise concerns. But I knew it wasn't just about noise. There was more behind this. I felt it deep down. Maybe it was because I'm part of the local VFW, a veteran who's tried to build a bridge between people, not walls. Maybe some didn't like the idea of veterans having a place to gather, to be heard. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let this letter stop me. Not without a fight. Because sometimes a barbecue is more than just food on a grill. Sometimes it's a stand. We lived in a quiet community. Tree-lined streets. Houses close but not crowded. Everyone knew each other's names, or at least waved when they passed by. It was the kind of place where kids played outside until the streetlights came on, and neighbors borrowed sugar or a ladder without hesitation. I've always tried to be a good neighbor, keeping my yard tidy, following the rules set by the HOA, and respecting quiet hours. I'm not one to stir up trouble or make waves. In fact, I liked how things were peaceful around here. But there was something missing. I felt like the community needed a bit more connection, something to bring us closer. That's why I wanted to host the barbecue. It wasn't just about grilling and eating, it was about coming together, sharing stories, laughter, and maybe healing old wounds. You see, I'm a veteran. I served in the military for several years, and after coming home, I joined the local VFW chapter. The Veterans of Foreign Wars became like a second family to me. A place where we support each other, honor our service, and remember those we lost. This barbecue was meant to be a way to bridge my two worlds. I wanted to invite neighbors, veterans, and non-veterans alike to connect and understand each other better. Maybe even have a moment of silence for those who sacrificed everything. I thought it would be simple. A Saturday afternoon, a few grills, some folding chairs, kids running around, and stories shared over cold drinks. Nothing fancy, just a community coming together, something we all needed more than we realized. I made sure everything followed the HOA's rules. I checked the guidelines, talked to a few board members informally, and made sure noise wouldn't be a problem. I respected the rules because I believed in respect, but soon that respect seemed one-sided. A few days after I sent out the invitations, the letter arrived. It wasn't an email or a phone call, just a plain envelope with the HOA's official logo stamped on it. I tore it open, hoping for some simple reminder or maybe a suggestion to keep things quiet. What I got instead felt like a slap in the face. The letter said my planned BBQ violated community standards and gathering restrictions. It warned me that hosting the event would result in fines, and if I refused to comply, legal action could follow. There was no explanation about what specifically made the BBQ a problem. No room for discussion, just a flat-out formal no. I sat there, stunned. How could a gathering of friends and neighbors, many of whom were veterans, be seen as a problem? The language was cold and impersonal. It felt like they were treating me like a criminal instead of a member of the community. I knew I had to try talking to someone. I reached out to a few HOA board members. I called, sent polite emails, even showed up at their office. I explained the purpose of the BBQ, how it was meant to bring us together, not disturb anyone. I asked if we could work out a compromise, maybe start earlier, end earlier, keep the noise down. But each time, I hit a brick wall. They stuck to their letter's wording. No exceptions, no negotiations. The board members gave rehearsed responses, quoting bylaws and rules, and warning about penalties. They didn't seem interested in hearing why this BBQ meant so much, not just to me, but to the veterans and neighbors who wanted to come. It was like I was invisible, like my past, my service, and my effort to build community didn't matter. The more I pushed, the more it felt like they were targeting me. Was it because I was a veteran? Because the VFW was involved? I couldn't say for sure, but the coldness in their replies hurt. It wasn't just rules anymore. It felt personal. I felt frustrated, helpless, angry. I kept asking myself, how does a neighborhood become a place where neighbors are shut down for simply wanting to connect, for wanting to celebrate, remember, and enjoy some good food together? The letter was clear, but the message was harsher. This BBQ wasn't welcome, not in my own backyard. And that's when I knew this wasn't going to be easy, not by a long shot. After reading that letter again and again, I sat in my quiet living room, wrestling with a difficult question. Should I just give in and cancel the BBQ? Or should I stand up for what I believed in, even if it meant clashing with the HOA? I'm a veteran. I know what it means to face orders and rules. But I also know what it means to stand up when those rules feel wrong. This wasn't just about a BBQ anymore. It was about freedom. Freedom to gather, to connect, to be part of a community without fear or shame. But the HOA rules were clear. Ignore them, and I risked fines. Or worse, a legal fight that could drag on for months or years. I thought about the peace I'd had here for so long. Was it worth throwing it all away? I needed advice, so I called my local VFW chapter. I told them what happened. The letter, the threats, the cold refusals. Their reaction was immediate and strong. They remembered their own battles, not just overseas, but right here at home. The fights they'd had to protect their rights, to stand against unfairness. The values they held close, loyalty, courage, and standing up for the little guy. They weren't about to let some HOA board bully one of their own. Together, we started planning. If the HOA wouldn't let me host a simple BBQ in my backyard, then we'd take the BBQ somewhere else, somewhere they couldn't stop us, somewhere public, open, and welcoming to everyone. We talked about inviting veterans from all over the county, neighbors from the community, anyone who wanted to come. It would be bigger than any backyard gathering. It would be a statement. The VFW folks volunteered to help with grills, tents, and music. Others reached out to local businesses for donations of food and supplies. Word spread quietly but quickly. I could feel a fire growing inside me. This wasn't just about one event anymore. It was about showing that community spirit and respect for those who serve can't be silenced by paperwork or threats. But the question lingered. How would the HOA react? Would they try to block us? Call the cops? Threaten legal action again? I didn't know. But I did know one thing. I wasn't going to back down. The BBQ was happening. One way or another. The plan was simple but bold. We wouldn't just settle for a small backyard BBQ anymore. No, this was going to be something bigger. Something the HOA couldn't ignore or control. With the help of the VFW, we started organizing a county-wide BBQ event. We found a large public park on the outskirts of town, a place open to anyone and everyone. It was a space big enough to hold hundreds, maybe thousands of people. We spread the word quietly but widely. Flyers were handed out at local businesses, veteran centers, and community spots. Social media posts went up under the radar. No mention of the HOA drama, just an invitation to join a celebration of community and respect. People responded. Veterans from neighboring towns, families who'd never met before, old friends from the VFW, and even strangers curious about what was happening. The excitement was building. Preparations were in full swing. The VFW volunteers brought grills, coolers, tables and chairs. Local businesses donated food, ribs, burgers, hot dogs, sides, and plenty of cold drinks. A local band agreed to play some music, adding to the festive atmosphere. But beneath the excitement was a layer of nervousness. Would anyone actually show up? Would the HOA try to stop us? Would law enforcement get involved? The night before the event, I barely slept. My mind raced with doubts and hopes. This could either be a huge success or a complete disaster. When the day finally came, I arrived early to help set up. One by one, people began to arrive. Veterans wearing their caps and jackets, families carrying coolers and picnic blankets, neighbors who had heard about the event and wanted to see what it was all about. By mid-afternoon, the turnout was astonishing. Hundreds of people filled the park. Kids ran around laughing. Veterans swapped stories. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years were sharing plates and smiles. And then some familiar faces from the neighborhood showed up. Those who, despite the HOA's position, came out to support us. Their presence meant the world. The HOA board members heard about the event too. They tried to send warnings and reminders about permits and rules, but it was too late. The event was already in full swing, and with so many people there was no stopping it. The BBQ wasn't just food and music. It became a celebration of something deeper: community spirit, respect for service, and the freedom to come together. I remember standing there, looking around at the crowd, feeling a wave of relief and pride wash over me. We had taken something meant to divide us, a letter trying to silence, and turned it into a powerful moment of unity. The doubts, the threats, the cold letters faded into the background. This was more than a victory over the HOA. It was a win for every person who believed that community isn't about rules on paper, it's about people. That day, we didn't just grill food. We grilled down walls and built bridges. And as the sun set over the park, I knew this BBQ would be remembered far longer than any letter from the HOA ever would. After the county-wide BBQ, the neighborhood was buzzing, not just with the sound of leftover laughter and chatter, but with talk about what had happened. The event had been impossible to ignore. The sheer number of people, the spirit of the day, the unity, it left a mark. At first, I waited for the HOA to escalate things. I expected more letters, more warnings, maybe even threats of legal action. But those didn't come. Instead, there was silence. The cold, formal tone of the earlier letter was replaced by quiet hesitation. They seemed unsure how to respond to a community that had come together so strongly. I think, deep down, even they knew they couldn't fight something so powerful. How do you argue against people gathering peacefully,
honoring veterans, and celebrating their neighborhood. That silence spoke volumes. For me, the experience became a powerful lesson. Standing up isn't always about loud protests or big battles. Sometimes it's about courage to say, "This is important to me," and having enough support to back it up. It's about community strength, how a group of people, veterans and neighbors alike, can come together to challenge unfair rules. I also felt a deep sense of pride, not just in myself, but in the VFW and everyone who showed up. Veterans often talk about loyalty and brotherhood, and that day, those values shone through. We weren't just defending a barbecue. We were defending respect, connection, and the freedom to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Something unexpected happened too. Some neighbors who had been silent before started seeing me differently. They came over to say thanks, to share a smile, or even apologize for not speaking up sooner. The barrier between us, built by fear or misunderstanding, began to break down. The HOA may still hold the rules, but they don't hold the spirit of the neighborhood. Looking back, I realized this was just one small battle, but small battles matter. They remind us that standing up for what's right can start with something as simple as a BBQ invitation. If you're out there facing unfair restrictions or cold bureaucracy, whether it's from an HOA, a landlord, or anyone else, remember this story. You don't have to fight alone. Find your people, find your strength, and don't be afraid to take a stand. Sometimes the simplest acts, gathering with friends, sharing a meal, can become the most powerful forms of resistance, and that's something worth fighting for. Standing up for yourself and your community is never easy. It takes courage, patience, and sometimes a willingness to face unfair rules head-on. But as this story shows, sometimes it's necessary to protect what matters, whether it's a simple BBQ or the right to come together as neighbors and friends. Have you ever had to fight for a simple right like hosting a gathering, or standing up against rules that didn't feel fair? Maybe you faced your own battles with bureaucracy, or people trying to silence you. I'd love to hear your stories and thoughts. Share in the comments below. Your experiences remind us all that community and courage go hand in hand. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message today. Your support helps us bring more real stories like this, stories about standing up, connecting, and making a difference, one small act at a time. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the simplest moments can become the strongest stands.